The woman woke up to the sound of alarms blaring. Her body jerked forward as the ship shook violently, tossing her from one side of the cockpit to the other. Heart raced as she tried to regain control, hands trembling as she gripped the emergency. Flight controls. The screen before her blinked in red, flashing warnings she couldn't fully understand. The words "system failure" and "crash imminent" glared at her with a chilling finality. Come on, she muttered under her breath, trying to steady the ship. Her hands were slick with sweat, her mind racing. She had trained for this moment countless times, but nothing could prepare her for the reality of it. She was out in deep space, light years away from Earth, alone. And now, her ship was falling apart, heading straight for an unknown planet. She slammed a button, trying to activate the emergency parachutes, but it was too late. The ship groaned, its hull shuddering as it plunged into the atmosphere. With one last crash of metal against metal, the world went dark. When she opened her eyes, everything was silent. The cold air stung her face as she groggily pushed herself. Upright, her head throbbed, but she didn't have time to focus on the pain. The ship's emergency lights were still on, flickering in the dark. She could see that the cockpit had been severely damaged, the windshield cracked, and the control panels smashed. She was alive, but she had no idea where she was. Slowly, she unbuckled herself from the seat and stumbled out of the cockpit. She could barely stand as the weight of her crash hit her. The room around her was shaking, and the hum of the ship's systems was giving way to eerie silence. She stepped into the wreckage of the ship, the control room now a maze of broken pieces and twisted metal. Panic surged in her chest, but she fought it down. Her first priority was survival. She had to check her supplies, find a way to communicate with Earth, or at least figure out where she had landed. The doors to the storage compartment were jammed, but with a few strong pulls, she managed to break them open. Inside were only a few emergency rations and basic survival gear. Nothing to help her get off this strange planet. She knew her only choice was to leave the wreckage and assess her situation. She grabbed the survival pack, strapped it to her back, and took a deep breath. It was dark outside, and the air was thick with an unfamiliar, almost metallic scent. Stepping out onto the alien soil, she could feel the ground beneath her shifting and moving, as though it was alive. The planet was a desolate place. The landscape was barren, stretching endlessly in every direction. There were jagged rocks scattered across the ground, and strange twisted trees stood at odd angles, their branches reaching toward the sky. The air was thick, oppressive, with a faint glow coming from the distant horizon. She started walking, carefully stepping around the debris of her ship. Her mind was racing, trying to process what had happened. Where was she? How far from Earth? Was anyone out there? She had no way of knowing. The radio systems on her ship were down, and the planet offered no signs of civilization as she moved forward. She noticed strange tracks in the ground, large, deep impressions, like something heavy had passed this way. The tracks seemed to lead toward the mountains in the distance. She felt a strange pull, an instinct to follow them. Something about the tracks seemed familiar, though she couldn't place it. The sun, or what passed for it here, was starting to set, casting the sky in shades of purple and orange. She had no idea what kind of planet she was on, but she knew one thing for sure: she couldn't stay near the wreckage. She had to find shelter before nightfall. Minutes stretched into hours. As she walked, her body ached, and the cold was starting to bite through her spacesuit. But just as she was beginning to lose hope, she saw something in the distance, a shadow moving among the rocks. She froze, holding her breath. What was it? A native creature. An alien. Her mind raced with possibilities, but she didn't have time to think. She reached for the survival pack, her fingers brushing the small weapon she had been issued for emergencies. If this was an alien, she was ready to defend herself. But as she approached the shadow, the shape became clearer. It was tall, humanoid, in shape, but unlike anything she had ever seen. Its skin was a deep shade of green, and its eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. It seemed to be watching her, its posture tense, but not aggressive. She took a step back, her heart pounding. What was this creature, and was it hostile? The alien didn't move. It just stared at her, its eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. For a moment, neither of them moved. The silence stretched between them, like a thin thread. And then, without warning, the alien spoke, its voice deep and melodic, but in a language she couldn't understand. For a moment, everything felt surreal. Was this really happening? Could this creature help her, or was it part of the danger she now faced? As the sun dipped below the horizon, the woman stood frozen, her mind racing with fear and curiosity. What would happen next? And could she trust this alien, or was this just the beginning of something far more dangerous? The crash had only been the beginning of her nightmare. The sun had completely disappeared behind the jagged peaks of distant mountains, leaving the sky a dark shade of violet. The woman stood at the edge of the wreckage, her eyes scanning the barren landscape. The air was thick and strange, almost suffocating. She felt small and insignificant on this alien world, surrounded by nothing but rocks, twisted trees, and an eerie silence that stretched out endlessly. The alien, the creature who had been watching her so intently, had not moved. It remained in place, its glowing eyes fixed on her as though it were studying her every move. The woman took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. Was it friend or foe? Was it going to help her, or was it a danger she hadn't yet fully understood? She couldn't afford to make any mistakes. She had no backup, no communication with Earth. She was on her own. With one final glance at the wreckage of her ship, she turned her back on it, determined to keep moving. Survival had to come first. She couldn't stay near the wreckage, as it might attract more danger. Besides, she needed to find shelter before the night closed in as she walked further from the crash site. The air grew colder, and the ground beneath her feet became rougher. The landscape was both alien and beautiful in its own way. Rock formations jutted out from the ground like ancient, weathered monuments, their surfaces covered in strange symbols she couldn't decipher. The trees, if they could even be called that, looked like twisted, skeletal versions of something she might have seen back on Earth. Their branches were long and curled, reaching into the air like grasping hands. The tracks she had spotted earlier remained in her mind, pulling her toward the mountains. She wasn't sure why, but something inside her told her to follow them. They might lead to something important, perhaps to a safe place. Or maybe to other creatures who could help. Her boots crunched against the dry earth as she walked, each step bringing her closer to the mountains. She noticed that the tracks grew deeper as she moved, as if whatever made them had been walking this path for a long time. They twisted and turned, disappearing into narrow ravines and then reappearing on the other side. The woman tried to follow, but the terrain was difficult and uneven and unpredictable. Still, her instincts pushed her forward. She stopped for a moment, crouching low to the ground to examine the tracks more closely. The deep impressions were wider than her own feet, suggesting something large and powerful had made them. She ran, her fingers over the earth, feeling a strange vibration beneath her fingertips. The ground was alive, responding to her touch in an almost unnatural way. Her heart skipped a beat. What was going on here? The mountain range grew closer, its towering peaks casting long shadows over the landscape. The air was thinner here, and each breath felt harder to take. She pulled her survival pack tighter against her back, adjusting the straps and trying to ignore the growing feeling of unease. Suddenly, she heard something, a faint sound that didn't belong to the wind, or the rustling of the trees. It was a soft, rhythmic noise, like something or someone moving through the underbrush. Her eyes widened. Was it the alien, or was it something else? She tensed, instinctively reaching for the weapon strapped to her waist. But just as quickly, she stopped herself. She needed to know more before jumping into a confrontation. She had no idea what this planet held, what dangers lurked in the shadows. Caution was her best friend now. The sound grew louder, closer. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw movement. She whirled around, her hand gripping the weapon tightly. But what she saw made her freeze in place. A figure stepped out from behind a boulder, tall and imposing, but not the alien she had met before. This new figure was different. Its different skin was a darker shade of green, its body much larger and more muscular. It looked like the creature she had already encountered, but far more intimidating. The creature was carrying something, a long staff with glowing symbols etched into its surface. The sight of it sent a shiver down her spine. The two beings, the alien she had met earlier and this new creature, locked eyes for a moment. The tension was palpable, and the woman felt caught between them. Who were these creatures? What did they want? And more importantly, why was she standing in the middle of their confrontation? The larger alien's eyes narrowed as it looked at her, then turned. Days passed as the woman trekked across the alien landscape, and the strange encounter with the two aliens lingered in her mind. The cold, harsh winds continued to sweep across the barren land, and the sky above remained a dull, oppressive shade of gray. Every day, the woman pushed herself to survive, determined to find answers. The survival pack she had scavenged from the wreckage was enough to keep her alive for now. But she knew it wouldn't last forever. She had stopped trying to understand everything. Instead, she focused on keeping herself alive. She built small shelters using what she could find, sheltered herself from the constant storms, and rationed her food carefully. Each night, as the temperature plummeted and the stars above shimmered coldly, she lay awake, thinking about what would happen to her. Would Earth ever know she was here? Or was she truly alone, stranded on a distant world with no hope of escape? But there was something else, something she couldn't shake. The alien who had been watching her from a distance had started following her. It wasn't immediate, but after the encounter with the larger alien, he had stayed by her side. At first, she thought it was just curiosity, but the longer she stayed on the planet, the more she realized that his presence wasn't accidental. He was watching over her. She wasn't sure why, but something inside her began to soften toward him. Despite his alien appearance, despite his cold demeanor, there was a quiet kindness in his eyes. He wasn't like the others she had encountered in her life. He wasn't a hostile force, nor was he indifferent. There was an unspoken understanding between them, one she couldn't quite explain. The woman had tried to speak to him, of course. She tried using the universal translator embedded in her suit, but it only produced garbled static. She was beginning to think she would never understand him, never know the reason for his presence. But as the days passed, she realized something even stranger. She was beginning to understand him without words. It wasn't just in the way he looked at her. Though his eyes held a depth of emotion that defied his otherwise alien nature. It was in the small things, the way he would point toward the horizon when a storm was coming. The way he seemed to always know where the safest path was. It was as if he was leading her, protecting her from something that lay just out of sight. It wasn't just survival anymore. There was something deeper. One evening, after a long day of traveling through the rocky desert, the woman collapsed on the ground, exhausted. Her legs were sore, and her body felt like it could no longer carry the weight of her journey. She had seen no sign of shelter for miles. The sun was dipping below the horizon, and the alien sky turned a dark purple. The stars above shimmered coldly, but the woman couldn't focus on them. She felt too weak, too drained. Without a word, the alien knelt beside her. His tall figure cast a long shadow across the ground as he reached out and gently lifted her into his arms. She didn't resist. For the first time in what felt like forever, she let herself be held. His touch was firm, but not rough, steady, but kind. His body was warm, and she could feel the heat of his skin even through the thin fabric of her suit. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to lean against him, to trust him. She felt a wave of something she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of safety. Of all the things she had feared about this strange alien world, she hadn't expected to feel protected by an alien being. But here, with him, it felt real. As he carried her to a small cave, sheltered from the cold winds, she noticed the care he took in ensuring she was comfortable. He laid her down on the soft alien moss that covered the floor of the cave, and then he stepped back, sitting down across from her. He didn't speak, and neither did she. There was no need. The silence between them was peaceful, a quiet understanding that they shared in this strange place. The woman knew that her situation was far from ideal. She was stranded on an alien planet, her ship destroyed, and no clear way to communicate with Earth. But in that moment, as the alien sat across from her, watching over her, she realized that perhaps this wasn't the end. Perhaps there was still a way forward. As the days passed, she began to rely on him more. He guided her through the planet's harsh terrain, showing her safe places to rest, sources of food and water, and even leading her to a hidden cave that seemed to offer shelter from the planet's deadly storms. There was a comfort in knowing she wasn't completely alone, that someone or something was watching over her. She didn't understand it. She didn't know why this alien was helping her, or what his intentions were. But as time went on, she found herself trusting him, her fears slowly giving way to curiosity. And in the quiet moments, she realized that she was no longer just a stranded astronaut waiting to be rescued. She was a woman sharing this alien world with a being from another galaxy. And somehow, that made her feel less alone. But with each passing day, her growing bond with the alien began to raise new questions she had never thought she'd have to ask. What did it mean for her future? What did it mean for the life growing inside her, the child that could never have been born without their connection? As the woman lay in the cave one night, the alien's steady presence beside her, she realized that she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living in a world that was as strange and unpredictable as the future that lay ahead of her. And despite everything, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of hope. Hope that, maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she had once believed. The cave was quiet now, the only sounds coming from the occasional shift in the rocks as the alien settled beside her. The woman had grown accustomed to the cold nights on the alien planet, but tonight, something felt different. It wasn't the chill in the air or the unsettling glow of the distant moons above. It was the alien, the one who had been watching over her, guiding her through this hostile world. Tonight, he seemed distant. For days now, he had been her protector, the only constant in a world that made no sense. But there was something about him, something she hadn't fully understood. The connection between them felt deeper than just survival. She had noticed the strange way he looked at her, the intensity in his glowing eyes, the way he seemed to understand her without words. But now she felt a shift. Something was about to change. The woman sat up, brushing away the alien moss that had gathered on her clothes. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The alien didn't respond. Right away, his glowing eyes shifted toward her, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. It was as if he was weighing the question in his mind, unsure of how to answer. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he stood up and walked over to the far side of the cave. For the first time, the woman saw something more a part of the alien that she hadn't noticed before. His skin, though green, seemed to shimmer in the faint light, almost as if there was more to him than met the eye. His muscles rippled beneath his alien armor, and the soft glow emanating from his body seemed to pulse with energy. He wasn't just a creature. He was something powerful, something ancient. He spoke then, in a language she couldn't understand, his voice deep and melodic. The words were foreign, but she felt the weight of them heavy, like they carried meaning that went beyond the words themselves. The woman watched him, confused, wondering if this was the moment he would reveal the truth about why he was here then. With an almost sad look in his eyes, the alien turned back to her and placed his hand gently on her arm. His touch was warmer than it had ever been, as if he was trying to convey something deeper. Slowly, he raised his other hand and pointed toward the distant horizon, where the mountains loomed in the dark. The woman frowned, trying to understand. "What are you showing me?" she asked, but her words seemed to fade into the air, swallowed by the vastness of the planet. He didn't answer, but the gesture was clear. He wanted her to follow him. There was something beyond the mountains, something he wanted her to see. Something important. With no other choice, she stood up and followed him, her heart beating faster with every step. The night had grown colder, and the distant howls of strange creatures echoed across the landscape. She had never felt more vulnerable than she did now, but there was a strange sense of trust between them, an unspoken bond that urged her to keep going. As they walked through the rocky terrain, the woman began to feel a strange sense of déjà vu. The air around her seemed to shift, the environment suddenly becoming more alive. The ground underfoot felt warmer, and the once-dead trees seemed to hum with a faint energy. The alien, though silent, moved with purpose, as if he had been here before. They finally reached a large plateau where the ground seemed to rise up into an unnatural formation. A massive structure stood at the center, hidden in the shadows. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. Twisted spires of alien metal rose from the ground like jagged claws, and faint lights pulsed from within the structure, casting eerie glows across the surface. It looked ancient, older than anything on Earth, and yet it was untouched by time. The woman stood there, mesmerized. She could feel the energy in the air, a strange pull that seemed to come from the depths of the structure. The alien stood beside her, his eyes now glowing brightly in the darkness. For the first time, she saw something else in his gaze, something that wasn't just curiosity or protection. It was fear. The woman's breath came in shallow gasps as she stood in the shadow of the ancient structure. The alien beside her, his presence more intense than ever, seemed to radiate with a mixture of fear and urgency. The pulsing lights from within the structure flickered, casting unsettling shadows on the walls. And for the first time, she felt an overwhelming sense of dread. It was as if the very air around her was charged with something ancient, something waiting to be awakened. Inside the structure, the silence was deafening. No sound, no movement. Only the cold whisper of the wind against the broken walls and the soft hum of energy beneath the surface. The woman's heart pounded as they walked deeper into the heart of the alien ruins. Every step felt like they were sinking deeper into the unknown. She had questioned so many questions, but there were no answers. The alien beside her had told her nothing. His gaze was distant, his usual protective stance replaced with something darker. He seemed as if he were leading her to a fate he had long feared. And then, in the center of the room, she saw it. A strange artifact, glowing faintly in the dim light. It stood on a pedestal, covered in alien symbols she couldn't understand. The power emanating from it was undeniable, a force so strong that it seemed to hum in her bones. This was at the heart of the structure, the source of everything. The alien secret. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The woman stood frozen, staring at the artifact as a chill ran down her spine. This was the key to her survival. She could feel it. Like an unspoken truth tugging at her. But it was also a trap. She knew that. She didn't fully understand it yet, but the pieces were starting to fall into place. The alien's hand on her arm tightened slightly, and she looked at him. His face, usually unreadable, was now a mask of uncertainty. He wasn't just protecting. He was asking her to make a choice that would change everything. "We must go," he finally said, his voice low and heavy with urgency. "It's not safe here." She turned to him, her eyes narrowing. "What is it? What's inside that artifact? Why are you afraid of it?" The alien took a deep breath, his glowing eyes flickering with something akin to sorrow. "It is not just an artifact. It is a relic of my people, a weapon. A power so dangerous it should never be used. It is the reason they are gone. The reason this planet is cursed." The woman's heart skipped a beat. "Weapon? You brought me here to show me this. This weapon." "No," he answered quickly, his voice tinged with desperation. "I brought you here because you need to decide. It is not just my fate or your fate. It is the fate of everything." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, but still shrouded in mystery. The woman's mind raced. What did he mean by everything? Was she supposed to destroy the artifact or protect it? Was it her child growing inside her that was the key to unlocking the power within? She felt a surge of panic. She had never asked for any of this. She was a scientist, an explorer, not a warrior or a savior. She had simply been on a mission. And now, somehow, her life had become tangled with the fate of an alien world. And an ancient power she could barely comprehend. But the alien had spoken the truth. The child growing inside her was no accident. She could feel it now. A strange, undeniable connection to the artifact. It called to her, pulling her toward it, urging her to touch it. The power was intoxicating, the promise of something greater than herself. "But at what cost? Do you want me to destroy it?" she asked, her voice trembling. The alien's eyes met hers, his expression one of deep sadness. "I don't want you to destroy anything, but I can't let you use it. I can't let you become like them." She understood then. He was afraid. Afraid that she would be tempted by the artifact's power, just as his people had been long ago. The temptation had destroyed his civilization, and now it threatened her as well. She could feel that danger in the air, a pull so strong it was almost irresistible. She had a choice, a terrible choice. To take the power for herself, to use it for reasons she didn't fully understand, or to leave it behind, to walk away from a fate that could change the entire universe. The woman took a deep breath, her heart racing. She had never asked for this burden, but it was hers now. She could feel the weight of it pressing down on her, like a promise she couldn't break. "Tell me what to do," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The alien's eyes flickered with something close to regret. "I cannot. The choice is yours. It always has been." She stepped forward, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The artifact stood before her, glowing with an otherworldly energy. She reached out a hand, her fingers trembling. The power surged within her, flowing through her body, filling her with strength, with purpose. But as her fingers brushed against the surface, something else happened. The alien stepped forward, his hand reaching out to stop her. He wasn't fast enough. She felt the energy pulse through her, and for a moment, everything went black. When she opened her eyes again, she was no longer standing in the ruins. She was somewhere else, somewhere darker and far more dangerous. The choice had been made, and there was no turning back. The darkness enveloped her. The air was thick with energy, heavy with the consequences of the choice she had made. The woman stood in the center of the alien structure, her hands still resting on the artifact, feeling the pulsing power flow through her veins. The alien was beside her, his eyes wide with terror, but he didn't speak. She could feel the weight of his fear, but it was too late. Something had already shifted. The artifact had chosen her, and there was no undoing it now. For a moment, everything was still. There was no sound, no movement, just the hum of the power within the artifact. And then the ground trembled beneath her feet. A low rumble echoed through the walls of the structure, growing louder with each passing second. She tried to pull her hand away, but it was as if the artifact was holding her there, its grip tightening, its influence stronger than anything she had ever felt. The alien stepped back, his face pale, his body tense with dread. "You've activated it," he whispered, his voice shaking. "The power has awakened. We're not alone anymore." The woman's heart raced. "What does that mean? Who else is here?" She didn't have to wait for an answer. From the shadows of the ruins, dark shapes began to emerge, moving with unnatural speed and precision. The woman's breath caught in her throat as she saw them, figures cloaked in black armor, their eyes glowing red like the embers of a dying fire. They were tall, their bodies angular, their movements fluid and predatory. The alien beside her gasped. The Guardians. Words sent a chill down her spine. Who were they? And why had they come? The Guardians moved closer, their presence heavy with malice. They were not of this world, not even of the same galaxy. The woman could feel their power, the dark energy radiating from them, a force that seemed to drain the very life from the air around her. They were here for the artifact, and now they were here for her. "You've awakened the power," one of the Guardians spoke, his voice low and guttural, like the growl of a beast. "And you've become its vessel. We've been waiting for this moment." The woman's mind spun. The Guardians, waiting for her. It didn't make sense. She hadn't asked for any of this. She hadn't asked to be part of their ancient struggle. The alien beside her stepped forward, his body rigid, his voice commanding. "Leave her alone. She has no part in this." The Guardian's laugh echoed through the chamber, cruel and cold. "She is part of it now. There is no escaping your fate, alien." He turned his glowing eyes on the woman, and for a moment she felt the weight of his gaze, the promise of destruction in it. The child she carries is the key. The key to unlocking everything we've worked for. The woman's heart skipped a beat. The child. It wasn't just the power of the artifact they were after. It was the life inside her. It's the one that had grown from the union between her and the alien. It was her unborn child that held the secret to everything. She had become a weapon, and the Guardians knew it. "No," she whispered, stepping back, her mind reeling. "You can't. They can." The alien beside her said, his voice grim. "They are the ones who created the artifact. The Guardians are the last of my kind. They've been hunting it for centuries, trying to control it, and now they've found a way to use it. And you," he paused, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "You've become part of their plan." A surge of panic rose in the woman's chest. She was no longer just a stranded astronaut. She was a key player in an ancient war she didn't understand. A pawn in a battle that spanned across galaxies. The Guardians were coming for her child, for the power she had unknowingly unleashed. The tension in the air grew thick. The woman's mind raced as she tried to process everything that was happening. Could she stop them? Could she undo the power she had activated? And then she felt at the pulse of the artifact, a sudden surge of energy that flooded her entire being. She gasped, stumbling backward, her body crackling with power. The Guardians sensed it too. They hissed in unison, their glowing eyes narrowing. "Get out of her way," the alien beside her growled, stepping between her and the Guardians. His form radiated with a strength she had never seen before. He was no longer just her guide. In this moment, he was a protector, a warrior willing to fight for her survival. The Guardians, however, were unfazed. "You cannot protect her." One of them sneered. "The power is hers now, whether she wishes it." Oh. The chamber, once filled with the crackling tension of battle, fell silent as the last Guardian crashed into the distant wall, crumbling to the ground in a heap of broken armor. The power within the woman surged, a deep hum echoing in her chest. She stood at the center of the ruin, her hands trembling as she tried to control the raw force now flowing through her veins. Her breath came in shallow gasps, but there was no time to recover. The fight was far from over. The alien beside her, his eyes wide with both awe and fear, took a cautious step forward. You did that?" he asked, voice filled with disbelief. "You've unlocked the full potential of the artifact." The woman didn't answer. She was too overwhelmed, too shaken by what had just happened. She had never intended to be this powerful. She had never asked for any of this. And yet, the energy coursing through her now felt undeniable. It was like a fire she couldn't put out. The Guardians, once towering and terrifying, were now scattered around the room, their once formidable forms lying still. They had underestimated her, thought her weak, thought her just a helpless human stranded on their planet. But they had failed to account for one thing: her survival instinct and the child she carried. The artifact had chosen her, and she had tapped into something far greater than they could have ever anticipated. But now, as the dust settled and the power inside her slowly started to ebb, the woman knew this wasn't just a victory. It was a turning point. She turned to the alien who had stood by her side through it all. His expression was no longer one of fear, but something else, something more akin to awe and admiration. He had seen her transform into something he never could have imagined, and she could see that in his eyes. His people had once been guardians of this power, but now they had lost control of it. And yet, here she was, someone who had no idea what she was doing, wielding a power that could shape the course of their entire universe. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice shaking. The weight of it all was beginning to sink in. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a key player in an ancient war, a war that stretched across galaxies, and the artifact had chosen her as its vessel. The alien stepped closer, his gaze steady. "Now, we decide. Together." His words, simple yet profound, carried a weight that settled deep in her chest. There was no going back now. The artifact had bound her to this planet, to this alien, and to the future of their species. She had the power to destroy or to protect, to shape their fate or leave it to the whims of the Guardians who would surely return with greater numbers. But there was something else she knew deep in her heart. The child she carried was no accident. It wasn't just the next generation, it was the next chance for their people to heal, to rebuild, to reclaim the power that had been lost. And though she had no idea what the future held, she knew she couldn't do it alone. The alien was right. They had to decide what to do next, together, as they walked away from the ruins, the wind howling at their backs. The woman felt a strange calm settle over her. The darkness that had once seemed so suffocating was now just the beginning of something new. She had no clear answers, no solid plan, but she had something more powerful than any weapon. She had hope. And perhaps, for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel quite so alone. The child growing inside her wasn't just a symbol of their uncertain future, was a promise. A promise that, no matter how dark the past, no matter how uncertain the present, the future could still be shaped by the choices they made. Together, they had the power to change everything. And as the woman and the alien moved into the unknown, they both knew that this was just the beginning of their journey. The galaxy, once vast and intimidating, now seemed smaller, as if the threads of fate had somehow woven them together, creating a path that was theirs to walk together. Ask ChatGPT.